The rescue. The planet burned. Explosions shook the ground as Commander Jake Carter ran through the battlefield, his pulse racing. Smoke covered the sky, turning day into night. Alien soldiers screamed in pain as gunfire echoed across the ruined city. The war between humans and the Zelfar had turned this planet into a graveyard. Jake's orders were clear: secure the area and move out. But as he stepped over rubble, he heard something strange. A weak whimper. He stopped. His sharp eyes scanned the wreckage. Someone was alive. Moving closer, he spotted a small hand peeking out from beneath broken metal and stone. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but his heart wouldn't let him. With a deep breath, he grabbed the debris and lifted with all his strength. Underneath, a young Zelfar girl lay curled up, her silver skin covered in dust, her glowing blue eyes filled with fear. She looked up at him, trembling. Jake stared at her. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a threat. She was just a scared girl caught in a war she never asked for. More explosions rumbled in the distance. The enemy was coming. "Damn it," Jake muttered. He was risking everything by stopping. But he couldn't leave her here to die. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and reached out a hand. "Come with me if you want to live." The girl hesitated. Then, slowly, she placed her delicate fingers in his. Jake hoisted her onto his back and started running. His heavy boots pounded against the cracked ground as he zigzagged through destroyed buildings. Blaster fire whizzed past them, barely missing. "Hold on," he shouted. The Zelfar forces spotted them. "They have a prisoner," one of them yelled. Jake gritted his teeth. No time to explain. No time to fight. Just run. His ship was parked on the outskirts, hidden under a collapsed bridge. If he could get there, they had a chance. But the enemy was fast, too fast. A plasma bolt struck a wall beside him, sending shards of stone flying. Jake stumbled. The girl gasped as he nearly lost his grip on her. "Stay awake," he yelled. He could feel her body getting weaker. She was hurt. Almost there. The bridge came into view. His small scout ship was hidden beneath it. Just a few more steps. Suddenly, a Zelfar warrior blocked his path. The alien was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with dark armor and a glowing red blade in hand. He raised his weapon. Jake had no choice. He dropped to his knees, sliding across the ground, just as the blade slashed over his head. With one quick motion, he pulled his pistol and fired. Direct hit. The warrior groaned and collapsed. Jake didn't stop to check. He bolted forward, jumping into his ship and slamming the door shut. His hands flew over the controls. Engines roared to life. Come on," he muttered. Outside, enemy soldiers swarmed the area, firing at the ship. The shield took most of the blasts, but it wouldn't last long. With a final push, the ship lifted off the ground and shot into the sky. Jake exhaled heavily, sweat dripping down his face. They'd made it. He turned to the girl. She lay on the seat, her breathing shallow. Her wounds were worse than he thought. "Hey, stay with me," Jake said, shaking her lightly. "What's your name?" Her eyes fluttered open. She stared at him, studying his face. Then, in a weak voice, she whispered, "Lariah." Jake nodded. "All right, Lariah. You're safe now." But deep inside, he knew it was a lie. By saving her, he had made enemies on both sides. The war was far from over. And now he was right in the middle of it. Escape and secrets. The cockpit was silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Jake Carter stole a glance at the alien girl lying motionless in the co-pilot's seat. Her breathing was shallow, her silver skin marred with bruises and cuts. Lariah, that was her name. She was no ordinary Zelfar. He could tell from the delicate features of her face, the regal glow of her eyes when she had first whispered her name. There was something different about her, and he had just risked everything to save her. A red light flashed on the control panel. Incoming transmission. Jake's stomach twisted. He knew exactly who it was. He hesitated before pressing the button. A holographic image of Commander Briggs, his superior, appeared before him. The older man's face was stern, his jaw clenched in frustration. "Carter, what the hell have you done?" Briggs' voice was sharp, filled with barely contained anger. "I saved a life," Jake answered coolly. Briggs leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You disobeyed direct orders. You were told to secure the area, not to bring back an enemy." Jake's grip on the control panel tightened. "She's not an enemy. She's a survivor, a wounded civilian." Briggs scoffed. "She's a Zelfar, Carter. That's all that matters. You had one job, and now you're a liability." Jake could feel his pulse quickening. "So, what now? You sending me to a court-martial?" Briggs' expression darkened. "No, I'm giving you a chance. Turn the girl over. Right now. A retrieval team is on its way to your location. Cooperate, and you'll keep your rank. Resist." He let the threat hang in the air. Jake's jaw clenched. "Hand her over. To what? Torture? Experimentation? Execution?" His gut twisted as he looked at Luraya, still unconscious. "No deal," he said, voice firm. Briggs exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Damn it, Carter. Do you have any idea what you've just done?" The transmission cut out. Jake barely had a second to process before warning alarms blared. "Enemy ships inbound." Jake's heart pounded. Damn it. The tracking signal. Luraya had a tracking device on her. That was the only explanation. He had to move now. With swift fingers, he pushed the thrusters to max, sending the ship into hyperspeed, streaking across the dark void of space. But the enemy fighters were fast. Too fast. "Come on, hold together," Jake muttered as the ship rattled under enemy fire. A loud groan escaped from behind him. Luraya stirred, eyes fluttering open. She sat up slowly, pain etched across her face. Where are we?" Her voice was soft, but there was something powerful beneath it. "Outrunning your people," Jake said, dodging another plasma blast. Luraya's eyes widened as she saw the pursuit on the monitors. A mix of panic and guilt crossed her face. "They tracked me," she whispered. Jake grimaced. "Yeah, figured that out myself." Luraya hesitated, then reached up to the base of her neck. Her fingers trembled as they traced over a small metallic node embedded in her skin. "The locator chip," she said. "I need to." Before she could finish, the ship lurched violently. The shields were failing. Damn it. Jake slammed his fist against the console. They weren't going to outrun them. Not like this. Then Luraya did something unexpected. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Her skin shimmered, glowing faintly. A pulse of blue energy spread through the ship. Suddenly, the enemy's targeting systems flickered and failed. Their weapons locked up. Their ships veered off course. "What the hell was that?" Jake demanded, eyes wide. Luraya's breath was shaky. "A disruption field. Only works for a moment." Jake didn't waste time. He yanked the controls, diving toward a nearby asteroid field. The dense, tumbling rocks provided the perfect cover. He weaved through them at breakneck speed, engines flaring. The enemy ships hesitated. By the time they regained their systems, Jake and Luraya had vanished into the shadows, hiding in the stars. Minutes later, Jake's ship drifted silently within the asteroid belt. The danger had passed, for now. Jake turned to Luraya, studying her closely. "All right. No more secrets. Who the hell are you?" Luraya hesitated, her glowing blue eyes meeting his. Then softly, she spoke. "I am Luraya Velzorin, daughter of the High Chancellor of Zelfar." Jake's stomach dropped. "Wait, you're a princess," she finished, "and the war started because of me." Jake leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Great. He hadn't just rescued a survivor. He had just kidnapped royalty. Luraya took a deep breath. I refused to marry the warlord my father promised me to. It was meant to form an alliance. But I ran. And war followed. Jake exhaled sharply. So, you're telling me I just made myself the #1 enemy of both sides? Loraya lowered her gaze. I never wanted this war. But now, because of you, I have a second chance. Jake shook his head. A second chance for what? She met his eyes. To end the war. If we reach the right people, if we expose the truth, we can stop it. Jake stared at her for a long moment. She was serious. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about changing the fate of 2 species. He sighed. You better be right, Princess, because we just stepped into the middle of the biggest mess in the galaxy. Loraya gave a faint smile. I know. Jake took a deep breath. All right, where do we start? Loraya's gaze hardened. We find the resistance. Betrayal and chase. Jake sat in the dimly lit cockpit, staring at the swirling asteroid field outside. The ship drifted quietly, hidden in the massive chunks of rock tumbling through space. His fingers tapped against the controls as his mind replayed everything that had just happened. He had rescued a princess. He had betrayed his own people. And now he was the most wanted man in the galaxy. Across from him, Loraya Velzorin, the Zelthar princess, sat with her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked out the window, her glowing blue eyes reflecting the distant stars. She looked calm, but Jake knew better. You should get some rest, he said finally. Loraya turned to him, her voice soft. I don't think I can. Jake sighed. Yeah, me neither. The ship's comm system suddenly buzzed to life. A voice came through, distorted, crackling with static. Jake Carter, this is your final warning. Turn the girl over. Jake froze. They found us. Loraya stiffened beside him. Who is that? Jake's hands tightened on the controls. He recognized the voice. Captain Riker. His former squadmate. His friend. Jake took a deep breath and hit the reply switch. Riker, listen to me. Don't, Jake. Riker's voice was cold. I don't know what you were thinking, but this is treason. You are protecting the enemy. You stole classified military tech and broke rank. Jake clenched his jaw. I saved an innocent life. She's not innocent. Riker snapped. Her people have killed thousands of us. And now you're running with her. How do you think this ends? Jake felt Loraya's gaze on him. You don't understand, Riker, Jake said, trying to stay calm. This war. I don't care, Riker interrupted. The Admiral wants you dead. But me, I'm giving you one last chance. There was a long pause. Then Riker spoke again. Surrender, or we take you down. Jake cut the transmission. For a second, there was silence. Then, warning alarms blared. Loraya gasped as 3 massive warships appeared on the scanners. They had been waiting outside the asteroid field, blocking every exit. Jake cursed under his breath. They're not giving us a choice. The ship's sensors beeped again. More incoming signals. Loraya's eyes widened. There are Zelthar ships too. Jake's blood ran cold. Both sides are after us. Running out of time. The asteroid belt had protected them before, but now it was a death trap. One wrong move, and they'd crash. One slow move, and they'd get shot down. Loraya's breathing grew unsteady. They're closing in. Jake's mind raced. He needed a way out. Fast. Hold on. He slammed the thrusters to max. The ship lurched forward, weaving through the massive, floating rocks. Enemy fighters swarmed behind them, firing plasma rounds. Jake twisted the controls, dodging between asteroids as blasts narrowly missed the hull. The comm system crackled again. Jake, stop. Riker's voice rang through the cockpit. I don't want to kill you, but I will. Jake's grip on the controls tightened. You'll have to catch me first. Loraya's voice was urgent. We need an escape route. Jake scanned the nav system, his eyes darting over the data. Then he saw it. A wormhole. It was unstable, dangerous as hell, but it was their only shot. He pointed at the screen. There. We make it through. We disappear. Laraya's face paled. Fats. Insane. Jake finished. I know. But there was no time to argue. The ship shook as enemy fire grazed the rear engines. Critical damage. Shields failing. Jake pushed forward. We either take the risk or we die here. Laraya hesitated for only a second before nodding. Jake hit the thrusters again. The ship barreled toward the wormhole as the warships closed in. Betrayal strikes. They were seconds away when the ship's alarms screamed again. Another signal. Jake glanced at the scanners. His stomach dropped. A Zelfar ship had moved ahead of them. And they weren't firing at the humans. They were waiting. Then, a voice filled the cockpit. I am Admiral Callus of the Zelfar Empire. Laraya's face turned white. Jake looked at her. Who the hell is that? Laraya's voice shook. My uncle. Jake's heart sank. Your uncle? Before she could answer, the Zelfar Admiral spoke again. Laraya, do not resist. Come home. Jake's mind reeled. This wasn't just about the war anymore. This was personal. And then, the trap closed. Jake's ship suddenly lost all power. Every screen flickered to black. Every control froze. Laraya gasped. They shut us down. Jake gritted his teeth. EMP pulse. They had been waiting for this. Outside, the wormhole spun wildly, its gravitational pull dragging them in. Jake fought the controls. Not like this. The comm buzzed again. Riker's voice was sharp. Jake, if you survive that wormhole, you're dead anyway. There's no place left for you. The ship tilted violently. The wormhole's energy wrapped around them like a storm. Laraya looked at him, fear in her glowing blue eyes. Jake. A final explosion rocked the ship. And then, darkness. The hidden planet. Darkness. A ringing noise filled Jake Carter's head. His body felt weightless, like he was floating through space. He tried to open his eyes, but everything was blurry, shadows and flickering lights spinning around him. Then, suddenly, gravity. Jake hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. He groaned, rolling onto his back. His body ached, his head pounding like a drum. He could hear the hum of the ship, but something was wrong. The familiar engine sound was replaced with static energy crackling through the air. The wormhole. They had gone through it. And somehow, they were still alive. He forced his eyes open. His vision slowly cleared, revealing the damaged cockpit. Sparks flickered from broken panels. The control screens were dark, the ship's systems completely fried. Then, a sound. A soft groan. Jake's heart jumped. Laraya? He turned, his breath catching as he saw her lying motionless in the co-pilot's seat. Her silver skin had lost its glow. Her long, dark hair was tangled, strands sticking to her face. Her breathing was shallow. Too shallow. Jake's stomach twisted. No, no, no. He unbuckled himself and staggered forward, his legs weak. He reached for her, pressing his fingers to her neck. A heartbeat. Faint, but there. Jake exhaled in relief. You're okay, he muttered, brushing stray hair from her face. You're gonna be okay. But they weren't safe yet. Jake forced himself up, gripping the control panel. He blinked at the view outside the ship. His breath caught. They weren't in space anymore. The ship had crashed on a planet. The sky was a swirling mix of purple and blue, with 3 suns burning bright in the distance. The landscape was vast, towering black trees with glowing roots, rivers that shimmered like liquid gold, and mountains floating in the sky, suspended by invisible forces. Jake had never seen a place like this before. And that meant one thing. They were completely lost. The awakening. A soft gasp made Jake turn. Laraya's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she seemed confused, her gaze darting around the cockpit. Then she saw Jake. "We made it," she whispered. Jake smirked. "Yeah, barely." Loraya sat up slowly, rubbing her temples. "Where are we?" Jake gestured toward the window. "No idea." Loraya stared outside, her expression shifting. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of recognition. Jake frowned. "You know this place." Loraya hesitated. "I don't know. It feels familiar." Jake crossed his arms. "That's not reassuring, Princess." Loraya turned to him, eyes serious. "I think we might be on Keveris." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Should I know what that is?" Loraya nodded. "It's a hidden planet, a place spoken about in ancient Zelfar legends, a world lost in time, untouched by war." Jake sighed. "Great. So we're stranded on a myth." Loraya ignored him, her gaze fixed outside. There could be people here, or something else. Jake didn't like the sound of that. Still, sitting inside a wrecked ship wasn't an option. The first encounter. Jake grabbed his blaster and a survival pack before stepping outside. The air was thick but breathable, carrying the scent of damp earth and something strange. Loraya followed, her bare feet barely making the sound against the soft, moss-like ground. As they moved through the towering trees, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Then, a rustling sound. Jake froze. Loraya tensed beside him. "Something's here." Jake raised his blaster. "Show yourself." The branches shifted. A figure stepped forward. Jake's breath hitched. It was a man, or at least something like a man. His body was tall and lean, his skin dark blue with faint glowing lines running across it. His eyes burned like golden fire, filled with intelligence. He wore intricate armor made of woven metal and organic material, and in his hand he held a staff crackling with energy. Loraya gasped. "It's them." Jake kept his blaster raised. "Them? Who's them?" Before Loraya could answer, the warrior spoke. His voice was deep, powerful. "Outsiders. You should not be here." Jake's finger tightened on the trigger. "Yeah, well, we didn't exactly plan this." The warrior tilted his head, studying Jake carefully. Then his gaze shifted to Loraya, and his entire expression changed. His eyes widened in shock. Loraya took a small step forward. "You know who I am." The warrior's grip on his staff tightened. "You wear the mark of the Velzoran bloodline." Jake frowned. "Okay, what does that mean?" Loraya didn't answer. Her gaze locked onto the warriors. "Are you one of the Kavari?" The warrior didn't blink. "We are the last of what was forgotten." Loraya's breath hitched. "Then the legends are true." Jake exhaled sharply. "Okay, can someone explain what's going on? Because I am completely lost." The warrior turned his piercing gaze back to Jake. "Your war has brought death across the galaxy," he said. "But you bring something else." Jake arched an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? And what's that?" The warrior's golden eyes darkened. "A storm that will decide the fate of us all." The impossible mission. Jake Carter had faced many impossible situations in his life. Ambushes, space battles, betrayals. But standing in the heart of a forgotten civilization on a planet lost to time was something else entirely. The Kavari warriors surrounded him and Loraya, their golden eyes glowing like molten fire in the twilight. Their weapons pulsed with an energy Jake didn't recognize, a mix of technology and something older. The leader, the one who had spoken earlier, stepped closer. His tall frame cast a shadow over Jake, his expression unreadable. "You do not belong here," he said, "but fate has brought you to us." Jake kept his blaster low but ready. "Yeah. Well, fate has a hell of a sense of humor." Loraya took a step forward, placing a hand on Jake's arm, a silent plea to let her speak. "Your people, they'd vanished long ago," she said softly. "The legends said the Kavari were wiped out in the wars. The warrior's face hardened. The legends lie. Luraya's breath caught. Then why hide? Why let the galaxy believe you were gone? The warrior's gaze flickered. Because the galaxy is not ready for the truth. Jake exhaled. Okay, look. We just crash-landed here. We didn't come for a history lesson. He glanced at Luraya. Tell them what you told me. About stopping the war. Luraya straightened. I am Luraya Velzorin, daughter of the High Chancellor. I was supposed to be a pawn in this war, but I refuse to be used. I want to end it. A murmur rippled through the Kavari. Some looked skeptical. Others, interested. The leader studied her carefully. Then he motioned for them to follow. This is not a place of discussion, he said. Come. The hidden city. They walked for what felt like hours through the glowing forests and ancient ruins that stretched across the land. Finally, they arrived at a massive canyon, its walls carved with symbols of forgotten history. Then, with a silent gesture from their guide, the ground trembled. A colossal gate, once hidden beneath vines and stone, shifted open, revealing something Jake hadn't expected. A city, not ruins, not a settlement, a full-fledged hidden civilization thriving beneath the surface. Towering structures of metal and crystal, floating platforms, and energy bridges stretched out before them. Thousands of Kavari moved through the streets, their movements graceful, their weapons always within reach. Jake let out a low whistle. Well done. Luraya's eyes shone with awe. This is incredible. The warrior turned to them. You stand in Keveris Prime, the last sanctuary of our kind. Jake raised an eyebrow. You call this a sanctuary? Looks more like a fortress. The warrior didn't deny it. Because that is what it must be. He led them deeper into the city, past glowing waterfalls and floating monuments engraved with stories Jake couldn't understand. Finally, they entered a grand hall, where an elderly Kevari woman sat on a throne-like structure, her presence radiating authority. This is Elder Vera, the keeper of the balance, the warrior said. Vera's golden eyes landed on Luraya. You carry the blood of the ones who doomed us, she said. Luraya flinched. What? Vera's gaze didn't waver. Your ancestors were among those who betrayed the Kavari. They sided with those who sought power in war. Luraya looked stunned. No, my father would never. Vera raised a hand. He may not have. But your lineage is stained by the past. And now you come here, claiming you want peace. Jake saw the pain in Luraya's eyes, but she didn't back down. Yes, she said firmly, because I refuse to let history repeat itself. Vera was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. If you truly wish to end this war, then you must face the truth. Luraya swallowed. What truth? Vera's voice was grave. The war was never about power. It was about control. And if you wish to stop it, you must strike at the heart of the ones who started it. Jake crossed his arms. And let me guess, that's not going to be easy. Vera's golden eyes darkened. It will be suicide. The impossible mission. The room fell silent. Then, Vera gestured, and a holographic map appeared in front of them. The war between your people and the humans is orchestrated by a hidden force, she explained. A group that controls both sides from the shadows. Jake frowned. A third party. Vera nodded. They exist beyond politics, beyond empires. They are called the Dominion. Luraya inhaled sharply. I've heard whispers of them, but I thought they were just a myth. Vera's expression was grim. They are very real. And they will never allow this war to end. Jake exhaled. All right. So what's the plan? Take them out. Vera studied him. You speak of war too easily. Human. Jake smirked. War is all I've ever known. Vera turned to Luraya. If you truly wish to stop this war, you must expose the Dominion's existence to the galaxy. The people must see who pulls the strings. Jake folded his arms. And how do we do that? Vera's gaze was sharp. You must break into the central command station, the heart of the war. It is the Dominion's most protected stronghold. Jake let out a low whistle. Sounds impossible. Vera nodded. It is. Loraya squared her shoulders. Then we'll do it. Jake shot her a look. We will. Loraya turned to him. We have to. If we don't, this war will never end. Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. This is a bad idea. Vera's lips curled in the faintest smile. Yet you will do it anyway. Jake groaned. Yeah. Story of my life. Vera gestured to the warrior who had led them. This is Commander Sereth, she said. He will accompany you. Sereth bowed slightly. I do not trust outsiders. But I will see this through. Jake gave him a dry smile. Well, I don't trust mysterious warriors from hidden planets, so I guess we're even. Sereth did not laugh. Jake sighed. All right. How do we get off this rock? Vera's expression darkened. The Dominion is already hunting you, she said. They know you survived the wormhole. Your only way out is through stolen access codes and a stolen ship. Jake blinked. Let me get this straight. You want us to break into a Dominion base, steal a ship, and then break into their main command station. Vera nodded. Jake let out a slow breath. Well, he muttered, at least it won't be boring. War or peace? The stolen Dominion cruiser drifted through space, its sleek black hull reflecting the eerie glow of distant stars. Inside, Jake Carter sat in a pilot's seat, staring at the looming Velzoran archive station in the distance, a massive orbital fortress floating against the backdrop of a dying sun. It was deep inside enemy space. Jake exhaled. Well, this is a terrible idea. Loraya, standing behind him, crossed her arms. It's our best chance. Jake gave her a sideways glance. Sure. If we don't get blown up the second we arrive. Sereth, their Kevari guide, remained calm as ever, his golden eyes fixed on the station. This station contains the truth about the Dominion. If we reach the data core, we can expose them. Jake smirked. Yeah, easy. Just waltz into a highly secure archive controlled by your father, the High Chancellor, steal classified files, and escape without dying. Loraya met his gaze. I never said it would be easy. Jake let out a breath and pushed the stealth systems to max. The ship faded from enemy scanners as they drifted toward the station, docking into enemy territory. The archive station was massive, a floating fortress covered in towering spires and defensive turrets. The Dominion might be controlling the war, but the Velzoran Empire still controlled their own secrets. Loraya's voice was steady. I can override security once we're inside. Jake raised an eyebrow. You sure? Loraya hesitated. Not really. Jake sighed. That's what I thought. Sereth leaned forward. We are being hailed. Jake's heart stopped. Damn it. Can they see us? Sereth shook his head. No, but they are expecting an incoming Dominion ship. If we remain silent, they will suspect something. Loraya moved quickly, tapping into the ship's transmission logs. This ship's clearance code is still valid. I can respond. Jake narrowed his eyes. You're sure about that? She gave him a pointed look. No, but I'm doing it anyway. Before he could argue, she activated the comm. A cold, deep voice filled the cockpit. Identify yourself. Loraya didn't hesitate. She deepened her voice, mimicking the Dominion's officers. Patrol Cruiser X-09, delivering classified cargo for internal review. Clearance code Alpha 72. There was a long pause. Jake could feel the sweat forming on his brow. Then, clearance accepted. Proceed to docking bay 4. Jake blinked. No way. Loraya smirked. You doubt me. Jake grinned. You terrify me. He guided the ship toward the docking bay, the magnetic clamps locking them into place. They were infiltrating the archive. As soon as the airlock hissed open, Jake, Lariah, and Sereth moved quickly. They were disguised in stolen Dominion officer uniforms, blending in with the dozens of soldiers and technicians moving through the massive corridors. The station was colder than Jake expected, its halls sleek and sterile, the air thick with the hum of hidden surveillance drones. Lariah led them, walking with the confidence of someone who had been raised in power. She had studied the station's layout before they arrived. "Data core is in the central chamber," she whispered. "We need access codes." Sereth remained alert, scanning every guard that passed. "The Dominion won't make this easy." Jake grinned. "Good. I was getting bored." Lariah shot him a glare. Not the time. They moved deeper into the station, avoiding patrols and slipping through security checkpoints. Then, a voice behind them. "Stop." Jake's hand instinctively went to his blaster, but he forced himself to turn slowly. A Velzoran officer stood in the hallway, his face pale with shock as he stared at Lariah. Jake's stomach twisted. He recognized her. This was bad. The officer took a shaky breath. "Princess." Lariah froze. Jake knew that hesitation was dangerous. They had seconds before this turned into a disaster. So he acted first. One punch. The officer collapsed before he could sound the alarm. Lariah gasped. "Jake." He grabbed the unconscious officer and dragged him into an empty room. "You can yell at me later. Right now, we need to move." Lariah hesitated but nodded. They hurried down the halls, one step closer to the data core. Uncovering the truth. The data core was heavily secured, but Lariah worked fast, her fingers flying over the control panels. The files were deep within the system, buried beneath layers of encrypted security. Jake kept watch, his blaster ready. "Hurry up, Princess." Lariah didn't look up. "This is decades of classified information. It's going to take a minute." Sereth stood beside Jake. "We will not have a minute." Jake followed his gaze. 2 Dominion officers were approaching. Jake cursed. "We're out of time." Lariah's eyes flashed. "Almost there. Got it." She yanked a data chip from the terminal. "This is everything. Proof of the Dominion's manipulation. Proof that both sides of the war are controlled." Jake grinned. "Perfect. Now let's get the hell out of here." Then, the alarms went off. Betrayed. Jake turned sharply as security doors slammed shut behind them. Red warning lights flashed across the room. Then, from the other side of the locked door, a voice Jake never wanted to hear again. "I knew you'd come here, Carter." Jake's breath caught. "Captain Riker." Lariah's hands clenched into fists. "You set us up." Riker's voice was calm, calculated. "You did this to yourself, Princess." Jake's jaw tightened. "How the hell did you know?" A slow chuckle. "You think I wouldn't recognize your tricks. The moment you used that clearance code, we traced it back to the stolen ship." Jake muttered a curse under his breath. "Damn it." Lariah whispered, "We can still escape." Riker's voice turned sharp. "You're not going anywhere." Heavy footsteps echoed from every direction. Jake's heart pounded. They were surrounded. Sereth gripped his energy staff. "We fight." Jake took a deep breath, adrenaline kicking in. They had the truth. Now they just had to live long enough to share it. He turned to Lariah. "You still trust me?" She nodded without hesitation. Jake grinned. "Good." Then he raised his blaster. And all hell broke loose. The final battle and Love's choice. The alarms wailed across the station, casting the entire corridor in flickering red light. Heavy boots thundered from every direction, armed Dominion soldiers closing in. Jake Carter tensed, gripping his blaster. This was it. No more sneaking, no more running. They had one chance to fight their way out. Lariah stood beside him, clutching the data chip that held the truth, the proof that the Dominion had been manipulating both sides of the war for decades. If they could get it out of here, they could end the war. But Captain Riker's voice crackled through the station speakers. "It's over, Carter. Drop your weapons." Jake gritted his teeth. "Yeah, come make me." The doors at the end of the corridor slammed open. A squad of Dominion soldiers stormed in, weapons aimed. Sereth, the Kevari warrior, stepped forward, his golden eyes burning with fury. He spun his energy staff, planting his feet in a battle stance. "We do not surrender." Larea turned to Jake, whispering urgently, "I can disable the station's security system, but I need time." Jake's heart pounded. Time they didn't have. He took a deep breath. "Sereth, buy her that time." The Kevari warrior didn't hesitate. He charged. The hallway erupted into chaos. Sereth moved like lightning, his staff crackling with energy as he struck down one soldier after another. Blaster fire filled the air, but he dodged effortlessly, his movements precise. Jake took cover behind a console, returning fire. "Larea, whatever you're doing, do it fast." Laraya's hands flew across the control panel, hacking into the station's mainframe. Her voice was steady despite the panic around them. "Almost there." Jake leaned out, firing rapid shots. A Dominion soldier lunged at him, but he drove an elbow into the man's ribs, grabbed his weapon, and turned it against him. Then, a shockwave slammed through the corridor. Jake was knocked off his feet, his ears ringing. He barely had time to process what happened before a familiar voice spoke right behind him. "Drop the gun, Carter." Jake's blood ran cold. "Riker." He turned his head slowly. Riker stood just feet away, blaster aimed directly at Jake's chest. The Dominion soldiers flanked him. Sereth had been overpowered. Larea was cornered. They were trapped. The ultimatum. Riker's expression was unreadable. "You can't win this, Jake. Surrender, and I'll make sure you're treated fairly." Jake let out a breath. "That's a damn lie, and we both know it." Riker's grip on his weapon tightened. "I don't want to kill you." Jake smirked. "Then don't." Riker exhaled sharply. "You're giving up everything for her." His gaze flicked to Larea. "For an enemy." Jake's voice was firm. "She's not the enemy." Riker shook his head. "You're a fool." Jake smirked. "Yeah, but I'm a fool with a plan." Before Riker could react, Jake moved. He lunged, grabbing the barrel of Riker's weapon and twisting it away. The two men crashed into the console, fighting for control. Larea saw her chance. She slammed her hand on the control panel. A pulse of blue energy rippled through the station. The lights flickered. The alarms cut out. Every Dominion soldier froze in confusion. Jake took advantage of the distraction. He drove his fist into Riker's gut, sending him staggering back. Sereth recovered, sweeping his staff in a deadly arc. Soldiers collapsed around him. Larea grabbed Jake's arm. "We have to go. Now." Jake hesitated, his breath ragged. Riker was still standing, still glaring at him. For a split second, neither of them spoke. Then, Jake turned away. Riker didn't stop him. Not this time. The final escape. They ran. The halls were in chaos. The station's security was down, but the Dominion's forces were scrambling, trying to regain control. The docking bay was just ahead. Their stolen ship was waiting. Sereth covered their retreat, blocking enemy fire as they sprinted up the ramp. Jake dove into the pilot's seat, igniting the engines. Larea collapsed into the co-pilot's chair, panting. "We have to send the data. Now." Jake nodded. "Do it." She plugged the data chip into the ship's system. Across the galaxy, the truth was broadcasted to every major network. Every leader, every soldier, every citizen. The lies of the Dominion exposed. The war ends. As they shot into space, Jake's comm exploded with transmissions. "Is this real? They lie to us. Stand down. Stand down." The war was crumbling. Jake leaned back in his seat, exhaling. They had won. But at what cost? Laraya's choice. Laraya's voice was soft. It's over. Jake turned to her. She was exhausted, but there was something else in her expression. Relief. Hope. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she whispered, I want you to stay. Jake blinked. What? Laraya took a deep breath. Stay with me. Jake hesitated. You're royalty. I'm a rogue ex-soldier. Laraya smiled. And? Jake chuckled. That's a pretty big. And? Laraya took his hand. For the first time in my life, I get to choose. And I choose you. Jake's heart pounded. He had spent his entire life running, fighting, surviving. But here, in this moment, he had something worth staying for. He smirked. Well, someone's got to keep you out of trouble. Laraya laughed softly. Then it settled. Jake pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers. The war was over, but their story was just beginning.